Welcome to the 7th episode of Unlearning with Henry-Cameron and Estrella. Today we have an amazing guest with us. Her name is Charlie Bynar, a friend of ours. Charlie is an author, artist, and president of Isaacs and Foundation. She's going to tell us all about that very shortly. Charlie, you recently wrote a book, Through the Darkness, a story of love from the other side. There it is. Thank you.
Beautiful cover.
Tell us.
Thank you.
Tell us.
This is, well, Henry, you mentioned the cover. So this is when I took Isaac to Bryce Canyon when he was about 6, and we spent 4 days hiking around in there. And he was walking through an arch, and I was like, "Oh my God, that's so cool!" It was actually an arch that went all the way around him, and I said, "You know, you got to walk through that a couple more times so I can get the right photo." And there you go. Good thing I did that, right?
Just as we have to walk through our grief over and over.
That's right. That's right.
Get the right. Yeah.
It was part of the journey, right?
What inspired you, Charlie, to write the book?
Well, I had so many paranormal experiences right after Isaac died. And I had some previous in my earlier years, but nothing that really, I kind of was just like, I noticed it, but it wasn't really anything that I dove into or investigated. I just kind of noticed it like, that's interesting. But then after Isaac crossed, that was just flooded with all these things that were happening. And of course, I was trying to deal with his passing, and I kept getting what I felt like was very specific messages to me from him in my dreams. And that really got my attention because I was like, I told my husband, I was like, I think Isaac's talking to me in my dreams. And this is what he had to say. He said, like the first dream I had, and it was only 2 weeks after he crossed. It was really soon. And, I'm just reeling with the sorrow and everything. And I had this dream, which was all kind of like normal nonsense. But then in the middle of that nonsense, it's like clarity. And in that moment of clarity, I heard his voice. I couldn't see him, but I heard him whisper in my ear. He said, "I miss you." And I said, "I miss you too." And then I woke up and my heart was just pounding. And because I heard his voice. It was his voice. Yeah. And I got up and made coffee, and I told my husband that, Isaac was talking to me in my dreams, and he is he's a civil engineer. And so if you can't measure it, it does not exist. So me talking to him about my kid talking to me in my dreams, he thought I was going off the deep end.
Has he had any experiences that he can't explain?
Yeah, and they were put in the book. So there was, and that was actually one of the things that I tried to explain in the book was how you progress from having no belief in the afterlife, like it doesn't exist, and how the transition happens from where you start making then you're kind of a little on the fence about it. And then you're like not on the fence about it anymore because now And so that progression in him and myself actually is shown through the book as you read it. And but he was much more stubborn because he's an engineer. He thinks like an engineer. And so getting those messages to him was kind of challenging.
I think it's very common for men to be not as open. And we're expected to be not as open.
I know, because you're taught to be closed down, which is really a disservice.
Yeah, it really is.
It's really a disservice.
I appreciate that you tell that story in the book, because I think that, I was just having a conversation with somebody. There's an organization called Reimagine, and it's right in line with the work that I do about reimagining the grief journey. And we were talking about how the grief world is most often woman-centric, mother-centric, especially around child grief. And I think that that's true. When you look at the numerous support groups that are available to grieving mothers, bereaved mothers, however you want to call it, they far outweigh things that are available for men.
Yeah.
What has your journey been around that divide? What do you think about that? Like, why do you
Well,
think it's so?
first of all, I think that it's a man can grieve just as much as a woman. First of all, you love your children. That's just a given. There's just nothing like that bond between a child and a parent. And
Period.
whether it's adopted, male, female, it doesn't really matter. The bond is that you love that child or that other person. And so the problem with, I think, well, one of the problems I would say is that men are taught to be tough, to grow up, don't cry, blah, blah, blah. And it's a really huge disservice to men. And then when they do go through grieving, they don't know how to express it because they've been told to be quiet. And so then how are you supposed to process it when you're just supposed to be shut down? And I think it's terrible for men's health because how are they supposed to process it? And then I know that they can't, then they're just welling up with all this horrible feelings unprocessed. And, and as someone had, I remember hearing something that, if you don't process grief, it erodes your soul from the inside out. And so it's so essential to process that grief. And so when you're taught not to, that's terrible, not only for men that lose their children.
Men have also have been conditioned to take care of the family, to be the hunter, the gatherer, to be the fixer of things. And the death of a child is something that cannot be fixed.
I know there's that strange concept of like people want to come and fix it, but there's no fix.
There is no fix. So it's very difficult for a man and for a woman too to process something because we as women have been conditioned to take care of the family. I think it's that nurturing is a natural thing for many women. We nurture. We're the ones that wipe the tears or put the Band-Aid on that boo-boo, and kiss that boo-boo. But what happens to us too when that child is not there?
Well, and see, I was a single father. And
I was just going to say that, Henry. I was going to say,
I was kissing the boo-boo. I'm the nurturer. And I think that there's because of conditioning, because of programming over generations.
Yeah.
There's an expectation that men are the rock. You are not there to express your feelings. And so many of us internalize those feelings. And I would say that a man's heart is as tender as a woman's. We both have masculine and feminine in us. And there's, it's about bringing those things into balance. I'm working on a project on sacred masculinity right now that actually integrates the two. Because we hear a lot about toxic masculinity. We don't hear a lot about sacred masculinity. We hear a lot about sacred femininity, the divine feminine. We hear nothing, right? So where is there room for men in the grief world, especially, which is such a raw, open...
Right. You need a place to be because first of all, because you're reeling from all that pain. And you need a place to go. And if it's only centered around females or women, and as you're saying, like in generally, but the demographics are changing. Generally, women stay home, take care of the kids, but that's not always the case. Sometimes there's just a man taking, he's a single parent. Maybe the woman decided to, she passed or whatever, for whatever reason. But because when you're the one taking care of that child, regardless of who you are, whether it doesn't matter who you are, then that bond can grow stronger because you're always with them. You're always taking care of them. You're always wanting, you're the one getting up in the middle of the night, making sure they're safe, and you take them to the park and so, it changes that dynamic. But of course, a man can grieve just as much as a woman.
And we do. And
you do.
And to bring it back into your book, that's why I'm really grateful to hear that you're sharing your husband's journey in there as well, because that means your book is accessible to men as it is to women, right?
Oh, that's great. Yeah. So with him though, it's kind of fun because he actually, one of the things that I really wanted to put in the book was the life lessons. And one of his life lessons was to learn that death was not the end, especially from an engineer's point of view. You always think, well, death is the end because, you know, here we are, and then we're dead, and then we're not here, and that's the end of the story. But the progression of his story in the book, because, well, should I share a spoiler?
It's up to you.
Little one, little one.
Very, yes. Don't share a lot. Just
Let's not call it a spoiler. We'll call it a teaser. How about that?
Okay,
Oh,
a teaser.
okay.
Let me see if I can figure out how to tease this in. But one of Chris's life lessons was to, well, see, I said was, so that's a little bit of it. Anyway, so Chris's life lessons one was to learn that death wasn't the end, and which was a big curve for him because, you know, he was rock solid on there was no afterlife. But as he watched me progress through many things that were unexplained, and he went from, oh my God, my wife's going crazy, to, maybe there is something to this. And then as we experienced certain things, like common things, which was we would be in the kitchen talking about Isaac specifically, and the light would go on, you know, like 5 times. And he was like, the light's going on. And I'm like, yeah, I noticed. And then we experienced a handful of these things. Well, and here's a really funny one. This one I loved. This is the one that really got his attention, and that he was no longer on the fence. So he went from absolutely no afterlife to maybe, you know, maybe not. And then I went and saw this one psychic medium who was pretty good. And she said, keep your eyes out for a hawk because Isaac's going to come through as a hawk. And he was like, well, that sounds like a bunch of, you know, and so, you know, it's like you could say anything, but I'm like, wait, listen, I am just telling you what she said. Okay. So that's what she said. Keep your eyes out for a hawk. Isaac's going to be as a hawk. And because I tell the story as that Isaac had a hard time getting through to him, but he really just didn't get a lot of messages. In my family, through the lineage from the generations, there was lots of paranormal experiences, the gift of being able to receive and talk to the dead and that kind of thing a little bit, not like Alison Dubois or something, but little snippets. But anyway, so back to this, you know, the hawk thing. This is where he was a little on the fence. And he goes, I had went to work one day and he was at home, and I was really tired. I was working as 12-hour shifts as a nurse, and I come home, and so I was a little bit tired. And he says, he was like at the kitchen table drinking a beer or something. He was like clearly upset, and he's like, you won't believe what happened to me today. And I'm like, what do you mean? You know, what happened? And he goes, I went for a bike ride, and then I went across the street to get the mail. And as I was coming back, a red-tailed hawk dive bombed me so much that I had to get out of the way. Like I had to dunk to get out of the way. And then the red-tailed hawk continued and hit a tree and fell on the ground.
Oh my God.
And I know. And he was like, you know, red-tailed hawks don't do that. And I was like, yeah, I never heard of that one myself. But he said then the the red-tailed hawk kind of like was stunned for a second. And then he kind of came to, and he flew off, and he was fine. And he goes, that was Isaac.
You feel it. You feel it. And this
yeah.
is
and he knew it from that moment on. He didn't question me anymore.
No, isn't it? Estrella, I know you've had those moments.
Well, I have many, many moments, but I wanted to mention something for, you know, the viewers, is that Isaac was not the hawk. Isaac was maneuvering the hawk, and maybe
he was influencing
when
influence
the hawk hit the tree. So
well,
yeah, I mean, I've had many of those.
In many cultures around the world, birds are the messengers.
Yeah, right? Birds are common messengers, like your cardinal.
Yeah, my cardinal is one. The peregrine is another. You know, this is the term that the Lost Travelers Club, my foundation, has coined, because there's never been a word like widow or orphan to describe a parent who's outlived a child, right?
I
You
know
look
you're
every
a
language,
parent, you're a childless parent.
childless
Instead,
parent, but I'm not a childless parent because
I
he's
know
very
because we still have we
right. I
still
mean,
have them.
bereaved parent. Well, am I bereaved? I was at the beginning, but I'm not bereft anymore. I don't feel
Not
that.
anymore. No.
Am I a
Yeah.
grieving
So,
parent?
yeah.
We've struggled, and I looked in every culture around the world for this word to find, and then it came in a dream state. A peregrine falcon swooped down out of the sky. Hello, messenger. Landed in
Right.
front. He looked up and said, "It's time." That's all it said. And I broke out of my sleep and I started researching the word peregrine. And I looked up in its original ancient Latin form, and peregrine meant, wouldn't you know, a lost traveler, a stranger in a field, a pilgrim on a sacred journey seeking, right? It ticked
Yeah,
all
there you go. That's a
boxes.
good one.
And it's such an elegant word. It's genderless. Men and women can use it equally. It's recognized globally in every country, in every continent. The only continent that doesn't exist, it's not native to, is Antarctica. So it's a universal symbol, right? And
Right. Yeah.
it represents courage, resilience, and strength. All those things we need to tap into to keep moving.
I was going to say those are the aspects we need to get through
They
that
are.
journey.
So
Gosh, because that's
as
rough.
a peregrine, and we have 3 peregrines sitting here today. What a gift! I would love to know, how do you resonate with that terminology and symbology, and what gives you the wind under your wings? What gives you that lift to be able to move forward on your journey with courage, with resilience and strength?
Especially when you don't feel like it.
Well,
Yeah.
it goes back to there's a little bit of both of you in here, so I got to answer both questions. But one is that the life lessons that I really kind of try to explain and bring forward in the book was that the things that we take with us when we cross over are not physical, obviously. It's what we learn. It's the value of those lessons. And so I became like, that's actually the gold that we're looking for here, is the things that you can learn from this life. And different situations bring on different things to learn from. So I just always try to say, okay, what can I learn from this situation? Not get stuck in the quicksand of that situation, because that's easy enough, but say, okay, I'm in a difficult spot, but what can I learn from it? And something that was really brilliant that Isaac said when he was 14, he wrote it in his journal, and I used it because he was actually he was so wise, really, for his age. He was way beyond this earth. And after he crossed, I looked at his journal, and he had written, and I feel like it was like a message for me, purposely left there for me, because he had written, everything is a gift, even pain. And with those gifts, we will pursue knowledge and eradicate hate. So even pain can be a gift. I thought, okay, so how can that be a gift? Well, the gift is that when you process the loss of a child, then for me, like, I no longer think that that death is an end. I see it as like we're here in the earth suit, as they say, and that this is just a temporary manifestation of us now, and that we are way much more than this here. And so that was a tremendous gift for me to receive from Isaac from the other side. And so there's the gifts, but you have to go through the journey. You don't get those gifts unless you go through the journey.
That's right.
And you can't, it's like, you can't go halfway to the top of the mountain. I mean, you can, and you'll learn some of it, but the real gifts are when you like move through that journey and not stay stuck in the quicksand. I think that's really essential.
And to also know that the journey is not linear. I think that a lot of people are still stuck in the Kubler-Ross model, where you have to go through these 5 stages of grief.
Right. It doesn't go that way.
Well, I have to say that
there's a lot of peaks and valleys too.
Yeah, the Kubler-Ross model is not wrong because at the time that it was developed, she was really observing terminal patients. Okay. And a person, when they find out that they're terminally ill, they go through certain emotions, not phases, emotions. But maybe at the time, the vocabulary may not have been exactly what was needed for today at that
Well,
time.
we know more. We know
Yeah.
more today.
Because we feel, these are feelings, these are emotions. Not everyone feels the same. Like I thought, I was very angry at first, and then I met a mom that, oh, I'm not angry. And I'm
No,
thinking, how's that possible? Well, it is very possible because we are so unique in our emotional, psychological, and physical bodies
yeah.
that we experience and see things from different perspectives. But I have something that I want to ask you,
Go for it.
Charlie, which is part of your beautiful story. You're the president of Isaac's Ant Foundation. When did
Yeah.
that start? And tell me a little bit about that because I think that is fascinating.
All right. But to touch on what you had just spoke about, and Henry,
Mhm.
before I move forward, I just want to say that lots of times, like in science or religion, or all across the board, sometimes we put down information, and then that it becomes a foundation. But as we learn more, then we update those systems. But
Right.
it's really important not to get stuck on terminology, because what one person calls heaven, the other might call it the
Exactly.
other side. Or
Exactly.
if you're a Muslim, then it's Jannah, I think it's.
Exactly.
So, but it's really, you're speaking of the same thing. And so it's really important to not get stuck on terminology, because that can be a roadblock.
It can be a roadblock and it takes the focus away from the real conversation, which is
Exactly, which is
think
really the
the
heart of it.
exactly,
Yeah.
Right.
exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, but then to yeah, because then you're just all you're talking about is terminology and not even the subject. And so then you're lost. And then it's a misfortunate event, because then you didn't cover the material. But anyway, back to Isaac's Ant Foundation. When Isaac passed, he was fascinated by ants. As you learn about ants, the more you learn about them, the more fascinating they are. One example is ants that live in the Sahara Desert. They're called the silver ants, and because they have this super reflective coat of hair to reflect the heat of the desert. But anyway, if you imagine yourself out in the desert, in the dunes of sand, well, everything looks pretty much the same, right? And it's a scorching heat. And so if you go out trying to find a meal, you've only got like 10 minutes to go find a meal and come back home without dying. And it's all sand dunes. And so how do you navigate back home? It looks all the same. And generally, ants use a chemical scent for a trail to come back home. But when you're in the desert, the wind comes and blows that sand away, and there goes your scent. And so that puts you into another category of navigation, right?
Right.
So lots of times they will, you can actually observe them come out of the nest, make a 360 to clock where the sun is, celestial objects and things like that. And then they also have a pedometer in their head. And so they know actually how many steps they've taken. So when they get to the end, when they find their food, then they know all they have to do is turn around, have the celestial object in the opposite field, and then walk those many steps back, and you're home.
Amazing.
So it's really amazing.
Not aunts, right?
Huh?
Just want to clarify, we're talking about ants, not aunts.
Ants,
That's
as
what
in this
I
six-legged insect.
Yes.
And
yes,
yeah,
that have better direction than I do.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, so the more you learn about them, that silver ant can run like 100 times its body length in a second. It can
Wow.
move like nobody's business. But anyway, the more you learn about them, the more fascinating they are. And Isaac just became really fascinated because he had learned something. And he was like, wow, that's amazing. And then he'd learn the next thing. And it became like a game for us where I would come home and he'd be, want to know the fun fact for the day about ants? And I'm like, sure, hit me up. That was like this thing. And I learned so many cool things. Like they're a super organism. There isn't a ant that's in charge. They're all in charge. There's no king or queen, or there is a queen, but she's not in charge. But anyway, he would teach me all these things.
Right?
Huh?
It's like a hive mind.
It's a hive mind, a super organism. Yeah, hive mind. And and so anyway, after he passed, I didn't know what to do. And I was just swimming in grief and going in circles. You know how you are, like a rat on the wheel, just spinning your wheels.
A lost trap. Absolutely.
Yeah. And my sister, Teresa, who I love to death, she's just great. She's my rock. She's always like, I'm going to pick you up, dust you off, and you're going to keep going. And anyway, she was like, I think you should do something around the ants, because Isaac really loved ants. And it gave me a focus. And this is another key about processing grief, is that if you can get yourself focused on something that honors your loved one, and you're busy with your hands, not just spinning your wheels, it can allow you to do something constructive while you're processing the grief. And that was really a key thing for me and my husband. So we started learning how to collect ants, and we grew colonies, and then we install exhibits across the United States and in Canada with ant colonies of Myrmecysticus mexicanus, which are those like honeypot ants that store honey nectar in their abdomens for lean times or where winter, so they always have food reserves. And I was somehow miraculously, I'm thinking that Isaac had his hand in this one, but got it into the American Museum of Natural History in New York City.
Wow.
Next to Central Park. So that was like, I mean, I didn't know how to raise ants. I didn't know a thing about it. And now my colony's in New York City's American Museum of Natural History. I can't explain that. That's Isaac's hand right there. I'm telling you that because, that
was helping you take it further. He was helping you take it further to make a difference, not just for the community that is going to learn about ants in ways that they didn't know before, but for you, Mama, because of what you were going through. Focusing on something other than the grief is very helpful. I focused on soap making.
Oh, that's awesome. My sister's been doing that, Teresa. I just mentioned her. She's been making soap.
I loved it, but I needed focus because I'm kind of hyper-minded. Right. And so it helped me immensely in that direction. And when I was ready to move on, I did. I don't make it anymore.
Right, exactly. And I don't raise colonies anymore, but we're trying to break the record for the longest lived insect, which is 28 3/4 of a year, held by a Lasius niger, a queen ant in German lab. And so this year I have 3 queens. One is at the American Museum of Natural History, my queen at home, which is in the back room there, and one at NAU. Those 3 queens are 8 years old this summer, next month. And anyway, so now I guess we have to just live 21 more years and they'll break the record.
Amazing. That's amazing. So, how old was your son when he passed?
He was 16. And
so he wrote that journal entry quite young. I mean, that's
I know. And just think about the incredible insight that journal entry has. At age 14, everything is a gift, even pain. And with those gifts, we'll pursue knowledge and eradicate hate was what he wrote. But, because he suffered a brain injury at birth, which that just still kills me. It's like he suffered his entire life because of people's negligence. It was Christmas Eve and they were busy at a party or whatever, and they were not paying attention. And Isaac was strangling. He had the cord around his neck twice. And had they delivered him on the first sign of distress, which was 25 and a half hours prior to his delivery, had they delivered him then, he would have been fine. But they waited another 25 and a half hours to deliver him. So if you can imagine, Isaac lived with all that, with a brain injury, and he struggled through it. And that's how he knew about pain, because he lived it.
He lived it.
Because he lived it. And when you live with something like that,
Yeah.
he was always such a sweetie because he knew about pain and how it was to struggle. And so he always made an effort to help other people. That was his really big thing, was to help other people, because when you know pain, you don't want other people to feel that pain. You want to save them from it.
Exactly what that means.
And I mean, that's why we help other people, is because we want to help people through that. And it was the same thing that he was very much about. He kind of was very centered around helping other kids that were ill or had handicaps one way or the other. He was always the guy that was going to help him out, which I just loved him for all. Well, I loved him for everything, but that was a real sweet thing of him to do.
That was the mission that he.
That was totally the mission. Yeah,
he came here to fulfill from the beginning of being in the womb and experiencing that pain. He knew, even then, what his mission was, and
he knew his mission, absolutely. And then here's a very interesting piece of it, because you know, as I struggled with trying to process all this, as I told Henry earlier about science, and I had investigated science and religion, and I got a lot of interesting information from both of them, but nothing that really satisfied me, that, you know, kind of really helped me. And then that satisfied my curiosity. I felt like I always had these questions, and I just wasn't, I was getting close, but I wasn't there. Like I was still on the fence about the afterlife. I was, but I needed confirmation, really, or something. And everybody kept saying, oh, you got to go see a psychic medium, go see a psychic medium. And I was like, I don't know. I mean, I just didn't really think of things that way. And anyway, I just kept getting, like, 2 people at work told me to go see somebody. And then my sister, Therese, she goes, why don't you go see Alison Dubois? And I was like, who's that? And then she goes, you know, the woman that's on Medium, the TV series Medium, that's played by Trisha Arquette. She goes, I said, that's based on a real person, you know, because I just thought it was like crazy that this woman could pick up a picture and then, like, have an idea of where maybe the body was or something like that. I just thought that was too far out. But anyway, I guess apparently it's not. Anyway,
that was my favorite program, by the way. I watched it all the time. Medium.
Yeah, no, it was awesome. Well, as it turns out, you know, I live in Flagstaff, Arizona, and she lives in Scottsdale, Arizona. So it's only like 2.5 hours down the hill. And so we looked it up. I booked an appointment with her, and I went and saw her. And one of the things that she was really super sweet lady. And she put you at ease right away. And she covered some very interesting information about my husband, which I don't want to be a spoiler on the book, but that was, and I got my definitely raised my eyes, you know, my eyebrows. And then she goes, well, who do you want to bring through that's on the other side? And I said, well, my son. And she goes, okay. And so after she does her thing, and then she has a conversation with you, she goes, well, the first thing that he wants you to know is that you guys were best friends. You were his best friend. And one of the things that he loved about you was that you treated him as an equal, you know, not just as a kid. And and it took me a little bit of time to process that bit, because I didn't even really realize that I had done that. It was just always like a given to me. Like, you matter just as much as, you know, this house is as much yours as anybody. It didn't even process. But anyway, apparently it made an impression on him. But and Allison, and then she started laughing after she said that we were best friends, and she started chuckling, and she's got this really cute little laugh. And I said, well, what's up? And she goes, oh, and I forgot to tell you, the morning of the reading, I didn't know what to wear because I was really nervous to go see her, and because she's pretty famous, and and I didn't know if you could, actually make contact with somebody on the other side, and so I was apprehensive about the whole meeting, and I was looking in my closet, and I was like, I don't know what to wear, and I had a t-shirt on, but I needed something else, and I kept looking through everything, and I was like, no, 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 and then I saw Isaac's hoodie, and I was like, well, duh, that's the right thing to wear, right? So I put it on, and I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of comfortable, and feels cozy. Well, then after, I should have told you that part before, but anyway, so then she goes, after she told me that we were best friends, she started laughing, and I said, well, it's funny, and she goes, he tried to get you to wear his shirt this morning, and that had just happened like that morning. And so there's this like, and I was just like, that floored me. And I was like, that's Isaac for sure. And and then she just said, everything about the tattoos and that we went camping. I mean, there were so many things that I slept with part of. There was just so many details. Her reading is so detailed oriented that you just walk away knowing that he's alive and well on the other side. So I was like, good to go. After that, I was a new person. I mean, that was very transformative for me. Yeah. And in that reading, back to the helping other people, Isaac, she goes, Isaac was like a counselor kind of person. He would have helped other people. That was his energy. And he goes, and she goes, and now that he can't do it, you're gonna do it for him.
Yeah.
That's exactly what she said.
The same way. I feel like our kids are living in and through us. That gives us a new sense of purpose, doesn't it? I mean, and
absolutely.
I'm very interested to hear, because you've talked about a little bit about the spirituality of it and the science of it. Where do you find? I'm particularly interested in both as well, and I'm sort of in the liminal space between the two. What have you found in your scientific mind that has validated or guided you in a particular direction, or where you are now, because it's a process, right?
Well, from the scientific perspective, my Isaac's dad came over to the house one day to deliver a book. He's and my ex David, Isaac's dad was very scientific minded, but he's also very he's a Baha'i, so he's also very devout Baha'i. So he is kind of much more grounded in that religious world than I ever was, because I was never a Baha'i because I didn't believe in God. Because I was like, I love all the ideas about Baha'is, but I don't, you have to believe in God in order to be a Baha'i. And so, I wasn't there. And anyway, he brings this book over to me at just a while after Isaac crossed, and it was called Biocentrism by Robert Lanza.
Love it.
Yeah. And I was grappling with trying to figure out the charts and how a particle, the smallest unit of matter, could be a wave or a particle, and depending on whether it's observed or not.
That's right.
Right. And so it's kind of right. This is the quantum mechanics, but it was like it went into the Schrodinger's, cat, whether if the box is still closed, then the cat can be alive or dead because it's not observed. And then once you open the box, then it's either dead or alive. Yeah. And so the thing that I thought it was really fun was, after I kind of got my head around that idea, was that here on Earth, maybe we're collapsed wave functions here because we're observing each other. But then when we cross, then we're back to superposition, where we have all those possibilities of the multiverse.
And different dimensions
of the multiverse, and time and everything. Yes.
Of wave and particle.
There is no time. It's all
exactly. It's superposition.
Superposition,
Superposition. And so I was that was really interesting to me. I really loved his explanations.
Big time.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the exploration. That's the road I've been on, which is why I wanted to hear your perspective, is that, it's proven to me for myself as both a spiritual person and a scientifically minded person. This is the bridge between the two, is quantum mechanics, quantum physics, quantum theory. It's all the same thing. Has proven to me that death itself is an illusion. It's not an ending. It's a continuation, right? There are people in the spiritual, mindset that say a death on this side is a birth on the other, right?
Right.
And for me also, I'm curious about the shift you talked about, this moment, this pivot in you, where you were in a sense reborn. That it also, it does, even though time is an illusion like death, it does take on a temporal quality. And when you find that alignment, right, it, you feel it, and you live it
Yeah,
fully,
and then you don't question it anymore.
and you don't question it
It
anymore.
becomes a known to you. So you're not
Right.
struggling with, like, does that or is it? You're not on the fence and you're not spending your time there.
That's
But
right.
yeah, so the entangled particles, and I loved your book, and that was really wonderful.
Thank
The entangled particle aspect of the quantum mechanics was I used that in the book because I loved the idea that entangled particles, regardless of how far you separate them, there's always this connection that we can't see. And
That's
so
right.
that's the same thing about, what we say, or what in this, when you lose a loved one,
Foods,
really
yeah.
you don't lose one. You're still connected. You
Yeah.
don't know, you can't see that thread, but those entangled particles are like entangled people. And we're all entangled with our loved ones on the other side. And
Yeah.
they work
And with
through us.
each other, and
Yeah.
with each other,
And
because
with each
there
other.
is a universal connection.
Absolutely. And so that connection, just because we don't understand it, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So
That's
obviously there is some connection between those
right.
entangled particles or entangled people. And that means that we're all entangled because,
Right.
there you go. So we're all part of one. And so then it opens all these doors. If we're all one, then what you do to others, you do to yourself. What you do to yourself, you do to others, because we're all one.
And that's
And
ancient wisdom. That's ancient wisdom. Yeah.
ancient wisdom, yeah. But when you can, instead of it just, the thing about abstract thought, if it's just a thought, you don't understand it, then you can't really apply it very well, because
Right.
you haven't processed it, you haven't figured it out. Once you can make sense of it, and then you're like, oh, I get how that works, then it becomes known to you, rather than just an abstract thought.
Were you able to channel that into your writing? That's why I wrote the Lost Traveler Field Guide, because I wanted to gently take people by the hand and lead them toward a thought process, a way of experiencing grief that maybe they hadn't considered before. Because when we think quantum mechanics, it's like that thing, you put
Yeah,
it,
it's
you put over
abstract thought,
it,
and it's like
my brain shuts
yeah,
down, right?
deer in the headlights.
How
Yeah,
were you able to ease people into that thought process as a writer?
well, I made the example of the entangled particles, and that how we're all entangled, and that even though death, because then also death doesn't separate us, we're still entangled,
That's right.
right? So, so you really never lose your loved one. They're just right here, right now. We
We
just
have
can't
access.
see them, we just don't have the eyes to see them. But then I tried to explain. Alonza also has several articles about now moments. Have you read those? The now moments,
So good.
like the multiverse and the now moments, and that really time is not linear on the other side. Linear here, that's how we process it, but
Yeah.
on the other side, it's not. And I loved his idea about all the now moments, because it kind of actually made sense to me that he likened it to what Kurt Vonnegut had said in his book Slaughterhouse-Five, which, if
Yeah.
you've read that book,
Yes. Brilliant.
yeah, and how the brain is a filter. I just
Yep.
thought that was also really fascinating from what Peter Fenwick, he was a guy that studied people that were actively dying. So he watched people at their
Yeah.
deathbed, basically like for 40 years, and did studies on how people, what they experienced and stuff like that. And one of the things that like a third of the people experience is a first degree relative coming to get them at their deathbed. So either like a parent or a sister or a first degree family member or a
Yeah.
second degree that had already crossed, so they'll say, "Oh, hey, Aunt Jan," or what, when they're like, and
Or the
everybody,
whole
or
family shows up. Yeah.
what? Yeah.
Or
And
sometimes
so,
the whole family shows up. And you know what's
David
interesting too,
Kessler.
the revelation for me was that our kids who have preceded us are now our ancestors.
I
They're
know
right
that is kind of crazy,
That
right?
is, that
right?
is, well, I think in my opinion, no, not crazy at all, because the moment that we cross over, I think that all this limited knowledge that we've had all of a sudden disappears. And
Yeah.
so we know things.
Right. Well,
Uh, exactly. Now,
that
I wanted
speaks.
to mention, what
I'm
was
sorry.
that?
Go ahead. I was
No,
going
no,
to
what
say.
was your question?
No, I was going to say, because is what you're speaking about is the idea that the brain is a filter, and so that when we disengage from the brain, like NDEs, when they've disengaged from the brain, then they see everything and they are super happy and they're no longer limited by the filter. But then
Right.
when they're, the paddles are brought back out and they're pushed back into their bodies, then they're like,
No.
it filters back on and now I can't remember everything. And so, and Peter Fenwick had said that he thought that the brain actually acts as a filter. And he's
Yeah.
he's a neurologist from
Yeah, yeah.
King's College in London. He's a scientific man. He's
Yeah.
That
not.
is also, David Kessler wrote a book about deathbed visions.
Mhm.
And it goes hand in hand with what Peter said, except that this is more of a spiritual as opposed to scientific. But it is a fact,
Yeah.
and at one time all of that was considered hallucination. But it's not a
Well, it still
hallucination.
is. It still is.
Well,
is.
but what
And
if it's
Yeah,
real? What
I
if we
know.
do see? What if
Yeah.
it's real?
No, I think it is real. And I think that's why it's important when you do those big studies, because then if you say a third of the people actually speak about that, and that's actually just the people who speak about it, 1/3 of the people cannot be crazy. I mean, they're experiencing something that's common. And they also get like deathbed visitors, or what's another one that they always speak about? I don't know, various things. But when you do big studies like that from a scientific perspective,
Yeah.
and you gather information, like a third of the people the peer research center, they say that a third of the people have experienced ghosts.
Well,
So
yeah,
or apparitions or something, or
I have
encounters
experienced
with.
operations, and they're not ghosts. They
Right,
are
because
spirits
we
that
are.
come here to tell us or show us that
Right.
there is a continuation of life. It doesn't end with death. Death is just like opening a door and going into another room where everything is open to you. And so for sure, to me, it was educational. And I didn't pay any attention to it until my son passed away in
Yeah.
2013. And
Well,
I don't like saying passed away, because no, he passed to right here,
Yeah. Yeah.
not right next to me. So,
right.
Charlie, as we wrap up here, is there
yes.
any last sort of wisdom that you want your readers and everybody watching Unlearning? We'll put a link to your book in the description, by the way.
Okay.
What's the big takeaway, if there is one, that you can sort of zone in on, that you would
Well,
like to take away from your journey as inspiration?
death is not the end. It's just the biggest illusion. And that you cannot lose your loved ones. They're still connected to you. And so take a big breath. It's going to be okay. And trust that you'll see your loved one on the other side when your time here is finished. you still probably have lessons to do here, and you still need to have the work to do that you need to do. Otherwise, you would cross over too. And when you do, then you'll see your loved ones. And so you can't lose them. And death is not the end.
It's so nice to meet somebody else who is out to change the lexicon around grief. And what last thing, what word would you use to replace loss? Because it's so ingrained in us. I'm sorry for your loss. You know, lost so much. And I know, and I want to validate for those watching that it does feel like a loss for a time.
It does feel like a loss.
Until it doesn't. And for some people that never comes, that day when it doesn't. And there are some people who do. But I agree with you, Charlie, that loss is a misnomer, that they're not a set of keys or a favorite pair of sunglasses that we can't find. We know exactly where they are, and we have access to them whenever we wish. So what would be a good replacement word, do you think?
I'm not sure of a specific word, but it's what I would say is that, I mean, I could think about it. That's how we get stuck on the terminology, which we had spoken about earlier.
Which we don't want to do. We don't want to get stuck on terminology.
Yeah.
Because it's not really healing. Okay.
But is what I was going to say is that the dynamic of the relationship changes. So they're not something that you can touch or feel or see. Well, you can feel them sometimes, or some people actually can see them, you know, that's a medium. But the dynamic of the relationship changes. And so it's best to help your own heart and your soul to heal and process this. See the relationship as it is anew. It's kind of, so if you can do that, now I think of my relationship with my son as I'm still connected to him from the other side, and I still try to honor him in every way I can, and I try to listen. He's got these little whispers on the wind, and so it makes me tune into a different aspect of myself, which is it's a huge gift. And so, but I think the value is to change the relationship as that relationship changed physically. You have to change it in your heart and your head so that you can tune into them in the new way.
And your gut.
And your gut. Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
One organ, the head, the heart, and the gut are one organ. They can't process each other. Trust your instinct. If something feels like a sign, if something feels like a whisper on the wind, which is a great name for your next book, by the way, Whispers on the Wind.
It is. It's like these little teeny whispers, because you know we're used to we're used to having things be loud, you know, listen to things that are loud or, you know, in your face and all that. But the connection to the other side is like a teeny little whisper in the wind. Like when I didn't know what to wear and I'm standing in the closet trying to figure out what to wear. And I hear this little just whisper, like, wear the jacket.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I got to wear Isaac's hoodie. That's the right thing. It's that little teeny whisper. That is the connection. It's really subtle. So it makes you tune into a different part of your aspect, which is a gift. So you can treat the new relationship as a gift to connect you to a higher self.
A higher self and a higher power, you know, depending on a person.
Well, your higher self and your higher power.
Right. It's very difficult to just see the child as a connection unless you can connect everything.
Right. Then it becomes an opportunity to be.
It is an opportunity
to be the bigger, the more higher frequency self, or connected to the higher, you know. And so
it's one frequency, and that frequency is love. It's how we amplify it. It's the volume control. It's, for me, it's not about higher or lower anything. We are one. We are one vibration, one frequency, and that is love. There needs to be an energy behind it to move that love between people, between our ancestors, including our kids, between countries, right? And that energy that moves that frequency of love is trust. If the trust isn't there, the love doesn't move. We are at one time receivers and amplifiers. So check your volume control.
That is true.
I love that. You know, that's actually one of one of Chris's other huge lessons was trust and love.
Yes.
So that's that's in the book.
Before we can trust, we have to be truthful.
Yeah.
Because if we're not truthful, then we're not trustworthy. But I want to leave you with another lexicon, to use your vocabulary, instead of bereaved mother, I think, and father, we're all legacy keepers. We are keepers of our children's legacy. And so it's something that for as long as we live, we can continue to show and teach. We are legacy keepers.
Yeah, I really like that.
I think words do matter. Terminology does matter.
Yeah, it does matter.
Terminology is frequency. And very often you go and look in any dictionary at the word grief and you see nothing positive. It's there
is really not much positive.
Fair, but none, zero. I've looked in all the dictionaries, nothing.
I have one for you. No, I have one for you. Look up the Chinese, Chinese definition, I think, of crisis. I think it's under crisis, and they consider a crisis a dangerous opportunity. So the danger is that you're in the crisis, but it's also an opportunity to learn something. And I always really like that because they saw that that was also an opportunity to learn a life lesson. So you have to check out the Chinese. Well, but it's under crisis, not grief.
Did you know that grief?
Maybe that's the word instead of loss. It's just it's a crisis.
It's a crisis.
You are in a crisis. Absolutely.
Crises are temporary, right?
I want you to know something. Everybody's talking at the same time, so I'm going to listen. Look at the map behind me. I spend a great deal of time teaching children that live in China and Chinese children that live in the U.S.
Right.
I will tell you that the way that they think and the way that they act and they see the world is everything is an opportunity.
And so I think that their definition of crisis is a dangerous opportunity.
It is a wonderfully dangerous opportunity.
That could be your third book title.
Well, so it's cool.
A dangerous opportunity.
Right, because you're in that moment, but instead of just only seeing that it's a crisis, but you can also stop and breathe for a second and say, there's an opportunity also. And that's the gift.
Well, and if you go back to the Latin root of the word grief, it actually comes from the same root word as gravity. This isn't to say that grief is not heavy, folks. It is. It is heavy. Well, but just like we carry certain weights, right? A pregnant mother is carrying the weight of that child, or twins or triplets or sextuplets or octuplets, right? They're carrying that weight with absolute love. And I think that if we can learn to find that same impulse in ourselves, those of us who are grieving our children, those of us who are in the depths, those of us who are stuck in what I call the vortex of mourning that is so hard to break out of. If you can think of your child, this is for men and women. They are gestating in you, in your soul womb, I call it. And what you're birthing into the world is not a new set of nerves and bones and skin and, the physical. What you're rebirthing, and I think my takeaway, Charlie, and I want to leave it at this, is you're birthing a new self into the world.
I was going to say a new you.
A new you.
Yeah, a better.
That takes trust, that takes gestation, it takes process. And you will find that renewed sense of empowerment, that purpose again, like you did with Isaac's Ants, like you did, Estrella, with your soap making, like I did with the Lost Travelers Club. It's all about that rebirthing of self, using grief as a friendly companion on life's journey and a teacher. And you're one of the greats, Charlie. You're a great teacher.
You're amazing.
Having you here today with us, beautiful. And please come back for a part 2, because this is, obviously we're not.
We could go on for some time, I think, on very many little aspects of different conversations for sure.
So great. So many threads. It's complex.
Yeah, it opens up a whole new world, and you can't cover that in an hour.
That's right. So listen, go get Charlie's book.
That's right.
Hope you enjoy it, and it's helpful. Keep going through the journey. Don't stop halfway, because the gifts are, you find those gifts, the opportunities, when you process grief, not stay in it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Thank you guys for your time today and for having me on your show. Much appreciated.